These books that you grew up with, the ones you read in your bed with a flashlight, they were banned. I'm not even kidding. We're talking about some of the most famous children's books of all time. The Lorax, Harry Potter, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Green Eggs and Ham, Alice in Wonderland, and for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why. Schools, libraries, entire countries. We're going to dive into the craziest reasons, promoting witchcraft, being anti-business. It's going to be wild. I guarantee you will never look at these stories the same way again. We're uncovering the secret history behind books you thought you knew. This is a full 15-minute deep dive, so settle in. We're playing by the rules while exposing the people who tried to change them. For every book, summary, where, when bans happened, why, and the outcome. Okay, first up is Dr. Seuss's The Lorax, published in 1971. Penned by Theodore Geisel, the man behind the whimsical rhymes, this book was reportedly his personal favorite. It emerged at a pivotal moment, just as the modern environmental movement was gaining mainstream traction in the United States, with the first Earth Day held only a year prior. Geisel himself was frustrated by the environmental degradation he saw around his home in La Jolla, California, and channeled that passion into the story. He aimed to create a narrative that was not a lecture, but a cautionary tale, one that could resonate with the youngest of readers about the importance of ecological stewardship. Little did he know, this tale would soon find itself at the center of a very different kind of battle, one fought not in forests, but in school libraries and boardrooms. For those unfamiliar, The Lorax is a short, illustrated environmental fable. It introduces us to a paradise filled with cheerful brown barbaloots, swomy swans, and the brightly tufted truffula trees. This idyllic world is guarded by the Lorax, a small, mustachioed creature who describes himself simply, "I speak for the trees have no tongues." His peace is shattered by the arrival of the ambitious Onceler, an entrepreneur who discovers that the silky truffula tree tufts can be knitted into a peculiar but popular garment called a thneed, a thing that everyone supposedly needs. The Onceler's small shop quickly explodes into a massive, smoke-belching factory. He chops down truffula trees at an alarming rate to meet the demand for his thneeds. As his business grows, the natural world collapses. The air becomes thick with smogulous smoke, the water is gummed up with gluppity-glup, and the wildlife is forced to flee their now unlivable home. The Lorax pleads with the Once-Lair at every step, but his warnings about greed and short-sightedness are ignored in the relentless pursuit of profit. Eventually, the very last truffula tree is felled. The factory shuts down, the Once-Lair's fortune is gone, and all that remains is a desolate, polluted landscape. The story ends with the regretful, isolated Once-Lair giving the last truffula seed to a young boy, entrusting him with the hope of regrowth, with the final, haunting word, unless. The book's message, while clear, was not universally celebrated. Challenges began not long after its publication, but they reached a fever pitch in the late 1980s. One of the most well-documented cases occurred in 1989 in the Laytonville Unified School District in California. This wasn't a random location. Laytonville is a community deeply rooted in the timber industry. A parent, whose family was involved in logging, felt the book unfairly portrayed their industry as destructive and greedy. She argued that it was indoctrinating young, impressionable children with a one-sided, anti-business political bias. The formal request for the book's removal from the second grade required reading list claimed it criminalizes the foresting industry and would cause children to see their parents' profession as evil. The argument was that schools should be neutral, and the Lorax was anything but. It was labeled as environmental propaganda. This local complaint quickly drew national attention, with timber industry groups and conservative organizations amplifying the call for its removal. They argued that the faceless, green-gloved Onceler was a stand-in for all corporations, a villainous caricature designed to demonize capitalism itself. Educators and librarians found themselves on the defensive, arguing for the book's literary merit and its value in teaching critical thinking about environmental issues. The Laytonville School Board held a hearing, and the community was divided. Ultimately, they voted to keep the book on the reading list, refusing to ban it. However, the controversy itself had a chilling effect. the case became a national symbol in the ongoing culture wars over education. While Laytonville kept the book, other districts facing similar pressures were more cautious. Some schools quietly removed it from curricula, while others moved it to sections for older readers or required parental permission. The goal of the challengers wasn't always an outright ban. Sometimes, simply forcing a debate and labeling a book as controversial was enough to limit its reach. Decades later, the story of the Lorax took another ironic turn. As its environmental message became more mainstream, the Lorax character himself became a marketable icon. In 2012, to promote the animated film adaptation, the Lorax was featured in a cross-promotional campaign for a new SUV. The ad declared the vehicle was Trifula Tree certified. This sparked a new wave of criticism, this time from environmentalists and cultural critics. They accused the campaign of greenwashing, using an environmental icon to sell a product, thereby diluting and commercializing the book's core anti-consumerist message. Could the very character who spoke against mindless consumption now be used to fuel it? The debate reignited public interest, proving the story's enduring power to provoke. So, what is the final verdict on the Lorax? It has never been subject to a nationwide ban, but it remains one of the most frequently challenged picture books in American history. Today, its place in the classroom is more secure, but not as a simple story. It's now widely taught as a foundational text for environmental literacy, used to spark discussions about sustainability, corporate responsibility, and the consequences of our actions. What began as a simple, rhyming fable has transformed into a complex cultural touchstone, a testament to how a children's story can force us to confront difficult questions about the balance between profit, the planet, and who ultimately gets to write the lesson plan. In 1997, when J.K. Rowling's first book Dawn was published in the UK, it launched a global phenomenon of unprecedented scale. Within a year, it arrived in the United States and a generation of young readers was captivated. The story of an orphaned boy discovering he is a wizard was more than just a bestseller. It was a cultural touchstone, igniting a passion for reading in millions of children and adults alike. The initial reception was overwhelmingly positive, celebrated for its imaginative world-building and compelling characters. But beneath the surface of this worldwide adoration, a different kind of storm was brewing. The narrative is now iconic. On his 11th birthday, Harry Potter learns he is a wizard and is whisked away to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. There, alongside his friends Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger, he navigates the complexities of a hidden magical world. He learns to fly on a broomstick, brew potions, and cast spells. But his journey is shadowed by the dark legacy of Lord Voldemort, the evil wizard who murdered his parents. Over 7 books, Harry grows up, facing not only magical creatures and dark foes, but also the universal challenges of adolescence. He learns profound lessons about friendship, loyalty, bravery, and the ultimate power of love and sacrifice. Almost as quickly as the series gained popularity, it began to attract criticism. The first formal challenges surged in the late 90s, just as the Potter mania was taking hold. By the early 2000s, with the release of subsequent books and the blockbuster films, these challenges had exploded into a full-blown moral panic. This wasn't a localized issue. Schools and libraries across the United States, from South Carolina to California, became battlegrounds. The controversy spread internationally, with sustained complaints registered in Canada, the UK, Australia, and beyond. The Harry Potter series quickly became, and for a decade remained, one of the most challenged series of the 21st century. The top reason cited in nearly every challenge was religion. The books were accused of promoting witchcraft, the occult, and in some of the most fervent arguments, even Satanism. Critics argued that by portraying magic, spellcasting, and divination in a positive and exciting light, the series normalized practices that their faiths considered dangerous and deceptive. One pastor in New Mexico famously organized book burnings, claiming the novels were a masterpiece of satanic deception. The concern was that children would be unable to distinguish between the fantasy of Hogwarts and what they saw as the real-world spiritual dangers of the occult. Petitions to remove the books from school libraries cited a litany of concerns. Beyond the central theme of magic, challengers pointed to the increasing violence and darkness in the later books, where death becomes a central theme. They also raised objections to what they perceived as the characters' frequent defiance of authority. Harry, Ron, and Hermione often break school rules, and even laws, in their quest to defeat Voldemort. Some parents and educators worried this sent a message that children should disregard rules they disagree with. Many argued that the books normalized practices and worldviews that were in direct opposition to their families' beliefs, and that their presence in public schools represented an endorsement of these views. Hundreds of formal challenges were filed with school boards and library committees, demanding action. In response, many libraries and school districts temporarily removed the titles from shelves while review committees deliberated. The outcomes of these reviews varied dramatically. Some institutions chose to move the books from the children's section to the young adult or even adult sections. Others implemented policies requiring parental permission slips for students to check them out. While intended as a compromise, these barriers created significant access inequities. Students from families who were supportive or simply less engaged could read the books freely, while others were effectively barred from participating in a major cultural conversation with their peers. Several challenges escalated into high-profile legal battles. In 2003, a federal judge in Arkansas ruled against a school district's attempt to restrict access to the books, citing students' First Amendment rights. Most direct legal attempts to ban the series outright ultimately failed on free speech grounds, but because school library policies are set at the local level, decisions remained decentralized. Policies varied wildly from one district to the next, creating a confusing patchwork of access across the country. The series was not without its powerful defenders. Authors, free speech advocates, educators, and organizations like the American Library Association consistently championed the books. They argued that banning the series was an act of censorship that undermined intellectual freedom. Supporters emphasized the profound moral themes woven throughout the narrative: the triumph of love over hate, the importance of courage and loyalty, and the powerful allegory against prejudice embodied in the persecution of mudbloods and other magical beings. They argued that the books provided a safe space for young readers to grapple with complex issues like death, loss, and injustice. In the end, many districts found a middle ground, adopting opt-out policies that allowed parents to restrict their own children's access without imposing a ban on the entire student body. This approach aimed to balance parental rights with the broader principle of intellectual freedom. The Harry Potter controversy fundamentally reshaped public discourse on children's literature, parental control, and the role of public education. It forced communities to have difficult conversations about whose values should be represented in a public library and where the line between selection and censorship lies. Ironically, the relentless challenges often had the opposite of their intended effect. News reports about ban attempts frequently sparked a surge in public interest, driving sales and library circulation even higher, a classic example of the Streisand effect. Today, the series is an undisputed staple of children's literature, a permanent fixture in the very libraries where its fate was once debated. It survived not only its fictional villain, Lord Voldemort, but also the very real attempts to ban it from the hands of young readers. The boy who lived also lived through the book-banning wars, and in doing so, left a lasting mark on the landscape of literature and liberty. Next, why a Candy Factory classic sparked decades of debate, race, revisions, and reading lists. When Roald Dahl's was published in 1964, it was an instant sensation. The story of a poor, kind-hearted boy, a life-changing golden ticket, and a tour through a fantastical factory captured the imaginations of children everywhere. Dahl's signature blend of whimsical fantasy and dark, cautionary humor made the book a modern classic. It felt magical, unique, and utterly unforgettable. But beneath the river of chocolate and everlasting gobstoppers, a significant controversy was brewing, one that would permanently alter the book itself. The controversy centered on the factory's workers, the Oompa Loompas. In the first edition, Dahl described them as a tribe of black pygmies from the very deepest and darkest part of the African jungle. Willy Wonka explains that he smuggled them out of Africa to his factory in England. He claims to have rescued them from a harsh life of eating mashed caterpillars and being hunted by terrible beasts. In exchange for their labor, the Oompa Loompas are not paid in money, but in their favorite food, cacao beans. While Dahl may have intended this as a whimsical arrangement, the imagery was deeply problematic. A white industrialist bringing a tribe of black people from Africa to work in his factory for food evoked the grim history of slavery and colonialism. As the book's popularity grew, so did the criticism. Librarians, educators, and civil rights groups, including the NAACP, condemned the portrayal as racist. They argued that it perpetuated harmful stereotypes of black people as primitive, exotic, and subservient. The narrative of a benevolent white man saving a native tribe was a classic colonialist trope that had no place in modern children's literature. The pressure mounted, especially with a film adaptation on the horizon. Dahl initially defended his writing but eventually conceded. In the late 1960s and early 70s, he and his publishers undertook a significant revision. For the second U.S. edition, published in 1973, the Oompa Loompas were completely reimagined. They were no longer from Africa. Their origin was changed to the fictional, isolated island of Loompaland. Their physical description was also rewritten. Instead of being black, they were now described as having rosy white skin and long, golden, brown hair. The now iconic image of orange-skinned, green-haired figures was actually popularized by the 1971 film. This visual became so famous that subsequent illustrations in the book often reflected this cinematic look, further distancing the characters from their original controversial depiction. But the challenges to the book didn't end with the Oompa Loompas. Over the years, parents and educators have raised other concerns. They've pointed to the book's perceived meanness, the gleeful way it punishes naughty children, and the fat-shaming directed at the enormously fat Augustus Gloop. The harsh comeuppances for each child, being squeezed, turned into a blueberry, or shrunk, were seen by some as excessively cruel. In 1988, a librarian in Boulder, Colorado, locked the book away, arguing it espoused a poor philosophy of life. Other schools have removed it from reading lists for younger grades or required parental permission, citing its dark themes and what they considered a lack of positive role models outside of Charlie. Today, many educators use the revised editions as a powerful teaching tool. It opens up discussions about stereotypes, authorial intent versus reader impact, and how social values evolve over time. The book's history serves as a landmark case study in how a classic can be revised to address harm and reflect a more inclusive understanding of the world. The story of Charlie Bucket has endured, but it hasn't remained static. It has been changed, contextualized, and is now often taught with a critical lens. It remains a sweet tale, but one with a complicated and deeply instructive history. Next, The Simplest Seuss, challenged from China to US schools for reasons you won't believe. A masterpiece of simplicity, only 50 unique words, and yet, it was challenged, and even banned in places, most famously, the People's Republic of China, 1965-1976, forbade it. Authorities labeled it Western propaganda, reading political subtext into a kid's rhyme. In the US, challenges claimed it encouraged bad manners and disobedience. Objectors fixated on repeated refusals, missing the ending. Because the story ultimately celebrates trying new things, a 1990s challenge even alleged Marxist messaging via Sam I Am's persistence. Most challenges failed. Librarians and educators defended it as essential early literacy material. Repetition and rhyme build confidence in new readers. It remains a worldwide bestseller and classroom staple. Lesson learned, even breakfast can become a battleground. Now, a 19th century fever dream accused of harming minds, defying morals, and insulting humanity. 1865, Lewis Carroll's surreal classic enters the world, a logic-defying dream of talking beasts and maddening tea. Early critics wanted clear moral lessons, not nonsense. They feared surrealism would undermine reasoning and discipline, irreverence and questioning authority, too subversive for some. In the 1930s, one Chinese province banned it. Animals using human language was deemed insulting to humanity. Elsewhere, regimes feared its anti-authoritarian spirit. Later generations projected drug metaphors. No evidence Carroll intended that. Despite censorship attempts, Alice thrived, now canonical and widely taught. Its banning history reveals anxieties of changing eras. What was feared as nonsense is celebrated as imagination. Let's connect the dots. Anti-business, witchcraft, race, obedience, nonsense. One pattern links them all. 5 different books, one repeating story. The reasons seem random, anti-business, satanic, talking animals, but they boil down to fear of new ideas. Each book challenged a powerful status quo. Social norms and representation triggered backlash. Even a simple no became a fight over control. Bans start locally, a complaint, a committee, a policy. Librarians and teachers argue for broad access. Results vary, from defeat to compromises that still restrict. Each case is a culture clash about who decides what kids read. Books aren't just stories, they're battlegrounds where values are negotiated, one shelf at a time. So, there you have it. Politics, religion, representation, obedience, nonsense. Censorship rarely works as intended. Bans often boost interest. Tell us in the comments which ban surprised you most. Subtitles are active. All narration and visuals here are original, licensed, or public domain. Thanks for watching. Freedom to read is freedom to think. Subscribe for more deep dives.